Good day, fight fans, and welcome back to Pressure Point.
I land my best shot even on me, then it's over.
I had a deal. After the Stipe fight, I had a deal on the table for over $1 million, and then the party poured off because before that, I had a deal.
Francis Ngannou just flipped the whole fight game upside down. No one's ever dared to go this far. He's suing the UFC for a jaw-dropping $50 million and exposing everything they tried to keep buried. Dana White never wanted the world to peek behind those confidential UFC doors, the missing millions, shady bonus structures, and leaked emails that could destroy reputations overnight.
They let you pretend that you're negotiating while you're not negotiating, because either way, you're still in the contract.
But what really pushed Ngannou over the edge was a hidden clause buried deep inside his own contract, the smoking gun that proved the UFC had been lying to him from day one.
I had a deal. After the Stipe fight, I had a deal on the table for over $1 million, and then they announced the Crypto.com deal, and then the party poured off.
Imagine
You're kind of like broke, you're struggling, and then you're seeing your next fight, okay, 50,000. You have to pay this and pay that and get away with maybe 20,000, and you have to pay your loan and all the stuff, and they have a new contract, 100,000. It's really hard to turn that down when you're in that position.
MMA world is on fire right now. This isn't just another fighter tantrum. This is the lawsuit that shook the octagon. Francis Ngannou, the former UFC heavyweight king, went from hauling sand in Cameroon to headlining Vegas arenas, and now he's declaring war on the company that made millions off his name. He's filed a $50 million lawsuit against the UFC and its parent company, TKO Holdings, claiming they built an empire off his sweat while robbing him blind and silencing him every time he spoke up about fighter pay and sponsorship rights. In his own words, they let you think you're negotiating, but you're not. This isn't some petty grudge match with Dana White. This is the biggest financial fight in UFC history. And if Ngannou wins, it could blow open every secret the promotion's been hiding for years. According to leaked filings obtained by ESPN's Mark Raimondi, Ngannou is accusing the UFC of withholding millions in unpaid bonuses, sponsorship royalties, and pay-per-view cuts from his 2021 and 2022 fights. He says he was underpaid by up to 80% of what he actually generated. That's not a complaint, that's a bombshell backed by receipts. And it gets wilder. Ngannou's legal team says they have internal emails showing that UFC execs purposely designed contracts to trap fighters into long-term exclusivity, a system Ngannou once called modern slavery in designer suits. The lawsuit hits them with everything: breach of contract, image exploitation, and blocking sponsorship deals that could have made fighters real money. Ngannou claims he lost tens of millions when the UFC forced him and others to wear exclusive branded gear, like the Crypto.com deal that banned outside sponsors. He even said he lost a $1.2 million personal sponsorship overnight because of it.
Based on what I know about the deal, which is not much, it makes no sense to me. I mean, you're gonna pay a guy not to fight for a year, and it's already been like 18 months.
Imagine grinding for years, becoming the world champ, and then watching a $1 million deal disappear just because your boss wants full control of your shorts. That's the core of Ngannou's fight: freedom. He's taking on a league that calls its fighters independent contractors but treats them like property. And here's where it gets explosive. Court documents filed in Nevada reportedly include private text messages between UFC execs calling Ngannou a risky investment we need to devalue before he gets ideas. If that's legit, it proves what Ngannou's been saying for years, that the UFC suppresses fighter leverage to keep payrolls dirt cheap while profits skyrocket. And those profits? Insane. Ngannou's team claims the UFC made over $1 billion a year during his title reign, while fighter pay stayed below 20%. This isn't just a lawsuit, it's a revolution shaking the fight world to its core. That's less than half of what athletes in major sports leagues earn, and that's the dagger. Ngannou's lawsuit paints the picture of a man cornered, not just inside the octagon, but by a billion-dollar machine that feeds on desperation. He was pushed to his limit, a system that breaks you mentally before you ever break physically. When asked why he stayed for so long, Francis once admitted, "You're kind of broke, you're struggling, and then they offer you $100,000. It's hard to turn that down when you know you're worth 10 times more." That line says it all. This lawsuit isn't just about one man's paycheck, it's about an entire system built to keep fighters just poor enough to obey every clause, every bonus, every last-minute renewal, a corporate chokehold disguised as opportunity. And now, Dana White, the loudest voice in the UFC and the man Francis is directly suing, has fired back in true Dana fashion. He shrugged off Ngannou's PFL deal, calling it nonsense, and mocked him for taking zero risks. But Francis's camp didn't stay silent. They hit back hard, citing Dana's own words as evidence that the UFC smeared his name on purpose. The lawsuit says Dana's comments weren't just trash talk, they were part of a planned PR hit meant to destroy Ngannou after he left. They claim Dana's public statements, like calling the PFL contract stupid and hinting that Francis was scared of John Jones, were calculated to make him look weak, kill his value, and poison potential deals.
By 20 months, they will come to negotiate. A little bit more money if you say yes. Yeah. Then they are giving you a new 40 months, which means they start over because of the money that they add.
The 98-page filing hits the UFC with charges of defamation, contractual sabotage, and deliberate interference with Francis's post-UFC income. According to the complaint, Dana's jabs cost Ngannou over $3 million in lost boxing and sponsorship opportunities. One brand even pulled out right after Dana told reporters Francis doesn't want to take any risks, he doesn't want to take any chances.
They have room to pay more. They have room to pay more.
The UFC's legal team is, of course, denying everything, claiming White's comments were protected opinions under free speech. But Ngannou's side says no way, this wasn't opinion, this was retaliation. Because the moment Francis walked away, the UFC didn't just turn their backs, they erased him. Gone from highlight reels, deleted from promo videos, and missing from the 100 greatest knockouts list. A shocking omission for the man once called the most dangerous puncher on the planet. One analyst summed it up perfectly. The UFC basically erased him. That's why this lawsuit feels different. It's not just about the money, it's about respect.
It makes no sense to me. I mean, you're going to pay a guy not to fight for a year, and it's already been like 18 months.
Insiders say Ngannou's legal team has emails dating back to 2020, where UFC execs discussed ways to contain Francis's growing influence and limit the spotlight on individual fighters. It's an eerie echo of the tactics used by WWE, another empire built on total control, where wrestlers stayed independent contractors while the company owned their image, name, and merch. And here's the crazy part. A source close to Ngannou's camp told The Athletic something wild. The UFC runs like Vince McMahon's empire. They let you think you're free until you realize every decision still goes through the same office. The irony's thick. Dana White has often said he learned from Vince McMahon, and just like Vince, Dana built an empire by controlling the narrative. But when Ngannou defied that system, when he dropped the UFC belt and went to boxing, making $20 million in a night, it wasn't just rebellion, it was betrayal. Now the court filings are calling it out loud, accusing the UFC of using brand extermination tactics to erase Ngannou's presence in the media, block his sponsors from TV, and even blacklist journalists who spoke out in his favor. But the wildest twist, it's not the lawsuit itself, it's what came with it. Ngannou's team dropped receipts, screenshots, emails, NDAs, and internal messages hinting that other fighters, including at least one former champion, are getting ready to join Ngannou's class action war. The fight's no longer just in the cage, it's spilling into the courtroom, and the UFC might finally have met an opponent it can't silence. The moment this story hit social media, chaos erupted. Hashtags like Justice for Fighters, Free Ngannou, and even Hack the Octagon started trending worldwide, and Dana White? Silent. Not a tweet, not a post, not even a statement. But make no mistake, when Dana finally speaks, it's going to be all-out war.
Francis's attorneys call it a monopolistic chokehold disguised as brand protection. To back that up, they've included sworn statements from two anonymous ESPN staffers.
Inside the UFC's darkest secrets, Francis Ngannou's lawsuit didn't just target the organization, it went after the entire fight machine. From TKO Holdings and Endeavor all the way down to Zuffa LLC and their big money broadcast and sponsorship partners. Everyone's being dragged into the spotlight for allegedly benefiting from exploitative contracts disguised as competitive deals. But the real explosion came from what insiders are calling the contract manipulation playbook. Buried in the 87-page filing is a leaked UFC document attached as Exhibit 14 that allegedly reveals how fighter deals are secretly extended forever, using something called rolling renewal clauses. These sneaky clauses automatically reset the contract every time a fighter accepts any new bonus, sponsor tweak, or even a rescheduled bout. As Francis once described it, it's a loop you can't escape. His team claims this trick kept fighters trapped indefinitely, locked in even when their contracts should have expired. In plain English, if you blinked, you re-signed. Sounds unbelievable? Wait till you see the numbers. The UFC's EBITDA margins hit 48%, one of the highest in pro sports. Yet fighters earned less than 18% of total revenue. Football players take home nearly half, and boxers pocket over 60% of event profits, while UFC fighters sometimes barely cover their training camps and taxes. So when Francis says the UFC can afford to pay more, he's not guessing. He's quoting their own books. When Ngannou walked away in early 2023, Dana White laughed it off in public, but behind that smirk, panic. Sources close to Endeavor told MMA Junkie that Francis's departure cost the UFC millions in potential African broadcast deals. The promotion had been secretly working on UFC Africa, a massive expansion Dana had hyped, built around a dream trio, Ngannou, Adesanya, and Usman. When Francis left, the investors backed. According to the lawsuit, the UFC retaliated almost instantly. Within 60 days of his exit, Francis was wiped from UFC digital marketing, gone from promo reels, erased from the top 10 knockouts video, and, worst of all, allegedly had his likeness licensing payments frozen.
Because everybody at that point you understand that you need another source of income. But not everybody has a chance to be in that position.
Court filings cite 2 internal emails from late 2023 where executives allegedly told marketing teams to phase out Ngannou assets pending audit. Translation, erase him quietly. That's when Francis went nuclear. He joined PFL, negotiated an equity stake, and became the face of their African expansion. Dana's reaction? First disbelief, then insult. But what he didn't say was even bigger. The PFL gave Francis $8 million guaranteed for his debut, $12 million for his next fight, and even paid his opponent $2 million. That's historic money. Then came the counterpunch. According to Fight Society, Ngannou's PFL debut sold just 10,000 pay-per-views, a paper disaster. But Francis's legal team claims the UFC leaked those numbers to the media to discredit him right before the lawsuit dropped. And it worked for a minute. MMA pundits mocked him, saying he needed the UFC more than the UFC needed him. Dana piled on, laughing publicly and calling the PFL a money pit backed by clueless investors. But behind the scenes, the emails tell a different story. Leaked communications allegedly show that TKO executives pressured ESPN to cut PFL coverage completely. That's when this stopped being business and became Sabotage. The lawsuit accuses the UFC of using its exclusive partnerships with networks like ESPN and BT Sport to suppress rival promotions, especially those showcasing ex-UFC champions. In simple terms, if you leave the UFC, your career doesn't die because fans stop caring, it dies because fans never get to see you again. Francis's attorneys called it a monopolistic chokehold disguised as brand protection. And they've got backup, sworn statements from 2 anonymous ESPN staffers who say they were told not to feature PFL content unless it involved comparisons to UFC fighters. One of them reportedly told Ngannou's lawyers, "We had to pretend he didn't exist." That's media erasure, weaponized. And it didn't stop at TV. The lawsuit also reveals that Francis's personal sponsors were warned off by the UFC. One athletic brand got a friendly reminder email from a UFC marketing director saying that advertising conflicts may affect future access to fighter collaborations. Translation, promote Francis, lose your UFC privileges. That brand pulled out within 2 days, costing Francis over $5 million in sponsorships in just 3 months. Still, the part setting the MMA world on fire isn't the money, it's the witnesses. Court insiders say several former champions have already been subpoenaed. Fighters like Aljamain Sterling, Demetrius Johnson, and even Nate Diaz, who's been calling out UFC pay issues for years. They've reportedly shown quiet support for Francis's stand, and if they testify, it could blow the whole case wide open.
By 20 months, they will come to negotiate. A little bit more money if you say yes, yeah. Then they are giving you a new 40 months, which means they start over because of the money that they added.
This isn't just a fight for freedom, it's the moment the cage door finally swings both ways. One insider close to the hotspot legal team dropped a bombshell. A former UFC accountant is reportedly preparing to testify that the company's fighter pay formula was rigged from the inside. According to this source, the UFC reclassified revenue on paper, separating pay-per-view profits and marketing income from event proceeds, all to make fighter shares look smaller. If that's true, it's corporate alchemy at its finest, turning profit into paperwork. And that's not all. A rumored statement from a former Zuffa lawyer allegedly described the UFC's athlete contracts as the most restrictive in modern sports. If that testimony hits the courtroom, it could blow the doors off the fight business completely. Because if Ngannou wins, or even settles on favorable terms, it won't just cost the UFC $50 million. It could open the floodgates. Imagine it, a tidal wave of lawsuits from ex-fighters like Tyrone Woodley, Tony Ferguson, and dozens of others demanding back pay for underreported earnings. The entire system could crumble from the inside out. Meanwhile, Dana White's keeping that trademark smirk, still defiant, still talking tough. After a recent Fight Night event, he brushed off the lawsuit like it was nothing. But one of his own quotes from that night has come back to haunt him. How great is this sport? Fans are flooding social media with that clip, slicing it with captions like, "Yeah, until you sue the company running it." The irony's brutal, and the optics couldn't be worse. UFC's parent company, TKO Holdings, is feeling the heat too. After the lawsuit hit headlines, its stock plunged nearly 9% in a single day, erasing over $1.2 billion in market value. That's panic in the boardroom territory. Within 48 hours, they reportedly hired a crisis communications firm to control the story, but the damage was already spreading like wildfire. Francis's legal team isn't flinching. His attorney, Samuel Parker, stood in front of reporters and dropped this line that's now going viral. This case isn't just about one fighter. It's about decades of systemic underpayment, about independent contractors treated like property. The UFC profited from an illusion of freedom, and that illusion is over. And he's right, because Francis isn't just fighting in court, he's winning in the court of public opinion. Clips of him calmly dismantling the UFC's logic on podcasts are racking up millions of views. He's not yelling, not ranting, he's cool, collected, and devastatingly convincing. Fans are starting to see what's really happening. The same company that once crowned him the baddest man on the planet now calls him delusional just because he wanted fair pay. As one journalist wrote, Ngannou didn't leave the UFC, he escaped it. That line has become a rallying cry, the heartbeat of a growing movement shaking combat sports. But let's be real, Francis's road hasn't been flawless. His PFL debut's 10,000 PPV buys were disappointing, and his boxing career has had rough patches too. Even he admitted after losing to Anthony Joshua that he's still finding his rhythm. But despite the setbacks, Francis is thriving, financially and personally. According to Fight Society's breakdown, Ngannou has earned nearly $40 million in just over a year. Compare that to his final UFC payday, around $600,000, and it's crystal clear why he says the system is broken. He's not guessing, he's living proof. And that's exactly why fans are rallying behind him like never before. Because in a sport fueled by power, pain, and pride, Francis Ngannou is now fighting an opponent no one's ever beaten, the system itself. Inside the UFC's Las Vegas headquarters, panic has replaced swagger. For years, Dana White and his empire brushed off critics like background noise. But Francis Ngannou's $50 million lawsuit isn't noise, it's a detonation. According to leaked internal memos reviewed by Front Office Sports, Endeavor's legal team immediately issued a media containment directive, ordering senior executives, including Dana, to avoid unsanctioned public statements. But it was already too late. The blast had landed. Francis hadn't just accused the UFC of cheating fighters, he'd exposed the gears of the machine itself, and those gears were grinding against each other. At the core of Ngannou's case is a simple but devastating claim. The UFC manipulated contracts to suppress fighter pay, block free agency, and control sponsorships, creating what his lawyers call a commercial monopoly disguised as competition. The empire's built on silence, but Francis isn't staying quiet. This isn't a feud anymore, it's a full-blown war that could redefine the fight game forever. The evidence, they say, proves everything. Attached to Francis Ngannou's lawsuit are internal UFC emails that could rewrite fight history forever. These leaked messages show top UFC executives openly plotting to delay contract negotiations until a fighter's market value dropped. One of those emails, sent directly to Dana White and matchmaker Hunter Campbell, reads, We can't match PFL or Saudi offers, but if we delay until his market cools, we can re-sign him for less. That single sentence could become the most expensive email in UFC history, because if the court decides the company intentionally stalled negotiations to suppress fighter pay, the UFC's entire independent contractor model collapses overnight. Ngannou's attorneys say this wasn't about one man. It was a systematic strategy. Fighters weren't being rewarded when they were hot. They were being frozen out until their leverage vanished. As one former accountant turned cooperating witness told the court, the company profited most from the fighters who spoke the least. The filing also digs into those now infamous rolling renewal clauses, the same ones that reset contracts automatically every time a fighter accepted a new bonus, sponsorship adjustment, or postponed bout. Years ago, Francis called it out. The company called it standard business. Francis called it slavery with paperwork. And the moment those filings went public, all hell broke loose. TKO holding stock plunged nearly 9%, wiping out over $1 billion in market value. Analysts blamed legal uncertainty. Fans called it karma. Within hours, hashtags like Free the Fighters were exploding across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. For the first time in 20 years, public opinion wasn't on Dana White's side. Then came the fighter rebellion. Nate Diaz tweeted, "He ain't lying." George Masvidal posted, "They talk loyalty until you ask for your worth." Even legends like Georgia St. Pierre and Demetrius Johnson came forward to back Francis publicly. This wasn't rebellion anymore, it was reckoning. Behind the scenes, the panic deepened. Multiple fighters reportedly reached out to Francis's lawyers, asking to join the case if it became a class action lawsuit. And these weren't rookies. These were former champions, ranked contenders, and battle-tested veterans who'd been stuck under the same system for years. In response, UFC lawyers allegedly scrambled, offering those same fighters improved contracts to buy silence before they could sign on as plaintiffs. But leaked text messages obtained by Bloody Elbow told another story. One fighter texted, "They can't buy loyalty forever. This house of cards is falling." Then came the knockout blow. A former UFC accountant turned whistleblower released internal spreadsheets showing how fighter earnings were reclassified to make the books look cleaner and the fighters poorer. Between 2019 and 2023, UFC fighters collectively earned less than 18% of total revenue. For comparison, NFL athletes earn around 48% and boxers over 60%. Meanwhile, UFC executives pocketed record-setting bonuses. The gap, long rumored but never proven, was now official evidence in a court file. And it gets even messier. Endeavor CEO Ari Emanuel, the Hollywood power broker behind the UFC-WWE merger, was reportedly furious. Not because he doubted Francis's story, but because the lawsuit threatened both sides of the TKO empire. As Bloomberg reported, if the court rules that UFC fighters were misclassified as independent contractors, then WWE performers could file identical claims. The same logic applies to both industries. After all, you can't call someone independent while controlling their schedule, appearance, sponsorships, and public image. For TKO Holdings, that's not just bad optics, it's existential. At Endeavor's Beverly Hills HQ, daily crisis meetings reportedly started with one grim agenda: control the narrative. But Francis was already 10 steps ahead. His lawyers launched a public site, fighterjustice.com, publishing redacted excerpts from actual UFC contract clauses. Within hours, the site got over 500,000 visits. Fans saw the shocking truth for themselves: buried clauses saying fighters' likenesses could be used in perpetuity without additional pay. Translation: the UFC could use a fighter's image, voice, or highlights forever, even after they left the company, without paying a single cent. It confirmed what fans had whispered for years: the UFC wasn't just promoting its fighters, it was owning them. Then came the twist no one saw coming. The Saudis entered the chat. In a plot straight out of Hollywood irony, the same investors Dana White once mocked, the Saudi Public Investment Fund, reportedly reached out to Francis's legal team about funding an athlete equity reform project. According to the Financial Times, the initiative would launch a new MMA organization where fighters own part of the promotion itself. If that's true, the UFC could soon face its first real global rival since Pride. And Francis, calm as ever, appearing on French television, composed, confident, and grinning as he reminded the world that his fight isn't just personal anymore, it's revolutionary. Francis Ngannou leaned back, smiled, and said it plain and simple. "They said I couldn't make money without them. I made 40 million. Now they'll pay more to stop me." It wasn't arrogance, it was prophecy. because insiders now claim TKO Holdings quietly offered him a $70 million settlement to end the lawsuit and sign a non-disclosure agreement. But Francis, he flat out refused. His lawyer, Samuel Parker, confirmed it. This isn't about money anymore. It's about fixing the sport. The updated court filings are demanding three things, and they hit at the UFC's core. Revenue transparency, reclassification of fighters as true independents or employees, restoration of sponsorship rights. In corporate America, that sounds radical, but for fighters who've spent years begging for fair pay, it sounds like freedom. Then came the most explosive twist yet, and it didn't come from the lawyers. During discovery, the court ordered TKO Holdings to turn over a mountain of internal data, over 40 terabytes of emails, payment logs, and sponsorship records. What investigators found buried inside shocked everyone. Among the files was one document labeled Operational Loyalty Incentives. It allegedly detailed secret cash bonuses paid to fighters who publicly defended UFC management during controversies, hush money disguised as loyalty rewards. If proven real, it's not just unethical, it's criminal. And it gets darker. The court also obtained a memo showing that some fighters were paid through third-party shell companies to hide their real compensation from athletic commissions. Those same companies, according to filings, later funded executive retreats and luxury giveaways. Picture this. While fighters were grinding for 12,000 fight checks, executives were sipping champagne in Monaco. The fallout was instant. Crypto.com, the UFC's $175 million sponsor, suspended all marketing campaigns pending legal clarification. ESPN quietly toned down its UFC coverage, and BT Sport in the UK aired a fiery debate titled, "Did Francis Ngannou just change MMA forever?" And suddenly, that question didn't sound so crazy. Behind closed doors, TKO's board of directors was reportedly in full crisis mode. Multiple outlets, including Business Insider, claimed there were internal talks about firing Dana White to protect shareholder confidence. But Ari Emanuel allegedly shut it down with one brutal line. "You don't cut the face of the brand in a firestorm, you hide him behind the flames." Meanwhile, Francis kept winning in the court of public opinion. Fans flooded every comment section, calling him the Muhammad Ali of MMA. Fighters from rival promotions started tagging his name in their posts, and even boxing promoter Eddie Hearn gave props, saying, "He's doing what no one else had the guts to do, taking on the system that feeds on them." By August 2025, the Nevada Superior Court officially scheduled its first full hearing. Reporters crowded the courthouse steps, cameras flashing, waiting for a glimpse of the man who once shattered jaws and now threatened to shatter an industry. Francis arrived in a black suit, no entourage, no flash, just calm, quiet confidence. He didn't need to speak, his presence said it all. He'd already won something bigger than a title. Because win or lose, the UFC can't unring this bell. The lawsuit has already forced regulators, investors, and fans to question everything about how combat sports operate. For 2 decades, Dana White built an empire, convincing fighters they needed him, that without the UFC, they'd be nothing. But Francis Ngannou proved the opposite. He walked away, got rich, earned respect, and came back with receipts. And now, the U.S. Department of Labor has reportedly launched a preliminary review into athlete classification practices across combat sports. Government code for "We're watching." If that review turns into a full investigation, TKO Holdings won't just face fines. It could face reclassification orders, forcing them to treat fighters as employees. That means back pay, healthcare, benefits, and financial transparency for more than 600 athletes under contract. By late summer, whispers spread that the UFC was preparing one final 9-figure counteroffer to make Francis walk away. But again, he refused. His message was short and sharp. You can buy silence, but not truth. And that's where the story lands, not with a knockout, but with a shift. A cultural, irreversible shift. For the first time ever, fighters are united. Fans are seeing behind the curtain. And the UFC's toughest opponent isn't a man in gloves, it's accountability itself. As the September trial approaches, one defiant phrase is echoing through gyms, arenas, and social media feeds worldwide, shouted by fighters taping their wrists and by fans who finally get it. "Give me my money." It's not just Francis's line anymore. It's a movement, and no amount of power, promotion, or PR spin can stop it. And that is all from Pressure Point today. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, share, and drop a comment letting us know which story stood out to you most. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.